Hello everybody. So today I'm going to review Horrorstör by Grady Hendrix. It's a horror novel, and if you've ever read anything by Grady Hendrix, you will know that in his books the horror is real. So if there is a fantastical element to it, if there is witchcraft, if there is demons, it is always what it says on the tin. There is nothing like, oh my god, we thought it was a demon, oh my god, we thought it was witchcraft. It's not. And there is kind of like a non-supernatural explanation to it. In all of the novels by him that I've read or that I've heard about, the horror has always been supernatural and real. So it's not like a trick of the mind or, it gets explained away in any other way. Now, for those of you who are old enough, this book will remind you of an IKEA catalogue, both in format and in the way it's presented. And the reason is that this book is set in an Orsk store. Now, Orsk being the rip-off IKEA, cheap American version of IKEA, and they also compare themselves to IKEA in the book. And they are like an IKEA store, only with less expensive stuff inside. And it is the story of Amy. Amy is, and again, there's going to be spoilers, and so if you don't want to listen to spoilers, the only thing that I can say is, if you know Grady Hendrix, if you've read and enjoyed My Best Friend's Exorcism, you will like this book. However, it does have a lot of body horror in it, and there's a lot of torture elements involved, so you might want to be careful if this is not for you. It's a really good book. I really enjoyed it, and I can recommend it if Grady Hendrix is your thing. Then this is a really good book. So now the spoiler version. We've got Amy, who is basically white trash, and who works for Orsk, and she used to work in a different Orsk subsidiary. But when this new shop or store opened, and since she lives right bang smack in the middle of the two of them, she was asked to transfer, and she didn't care because, the commute would have been the same, but they needed experienced people to go to the new store. And basically she's not got any money. She's in arrears on the rent for her room in a shared house, and she occasionally has to sleep in her car, I believe. And her parents, her mother is divorced and lives in a trailer, and her new husband really basically doesn't really like her that much, and blah blah, and she never finished her schooling, she never finished her education, and she's been working in Orsk. However, this new store that she's working in, she's not very happy with, and also with the floor manager. And essentially also there are weird things happening. And the weird things that are happening are, number one, that they come in the morning, and there's a really weird smell in the air, and also some form of detritus, some form of dirt. Some think it's excrement, others say they don't know what it is, has been basically deposited somewhere on the display furniture. And in addition, they have been receiving text messages on their mobile phones saying help. So that's a really odd thing, and they are really kind of like weirded out about it. And essentially also she's put in for a transfer back to her old Orsk branch, and she's now waiting for this transfer to come through. But when she gets in on that particular day, her branch manager wants to talk to her, and she believes that she's going to be fired. So she basically sits down. She really doesn't like him. And when she's sitting down and waiting for her appointment, she's also joined by another employee who is kind of like the heart and soul of the store. And she says, well, he wanted to speak to me as well. So then she's like, well, it can't really be about me being fired, because nobody would fire you. So they go in, and he says to them, guys, there is something weird going on, and I want to ask you to spend the night here with me and watch the store and see if something's happening, because there seems to be some kind of person walking around, possibly breaking in. We couldn't find anything. There's nothing on the cameras, but something's going on. And I'm gonna pay you double. And both of them need money. Amy more so than her colleague, but they both agree. And they both come in after hours, and the three of them sit around and wait. And it is then that shit starts going down. So first of all, they come across a presence, which turns out to be a homeless man who basically lets himself be locked in after the store closes to have a place to sleep, but he's harmless. Then they come across two other employees, one of whom is a ghost hunter, and the other one just wants to get into her pants. So basically he just goes along with her idea of, oh, there are ghosts and they've set up all of this equipment, like recording equipment, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, things are kind of getting weirder because the lights go out, and then when they use their flashlights to find their way, suddenly it seems like the furniture is shifting and the different areas. And if you've ever been to an IKEA store, you know what I'm talking about. IKEA basically sets up its stores in such a way that each section models a particular type of room in your building, like the kitchen section, the bedroom section, the office section. And they have those model rooms that you can kind of see what the bathroom would look like in situ, what the kitchen would look like in situ, what the office would look like in situ. But suddenly, and if you've ever been there, and if you've ever gotten turned around, as I have several times, and as other people have several times, even a well-lit, well-populated IKEA can become quite traumatic if you are trying to find someone, or if you're trying to find your way out and you honestly can't find the floor plan. It's now a lot improved in that you can always cross through different sections and take a shortcut. But I remember in the old days, the psychology behind it was they wanted to steer you so that you had to walk through the whole store and see everything just to make you buy more. And so I remember in the 80s, there was no getting out. It really felt like you were trapped and you had to take the circuit of the house before you could leave. And essentially, this is what's happening here. Suddenly, they're like, okay, well, behind the office, there should be the bedroom. But how, lo and behold, how is it possible that I'm now standing in a kitchen? So you get my drift. And it is getting more and more claustrophobic and also more and more menacing. So the house itself is becoming menacing. Because the one presence that they noticed was the homeless man, and he's not a threat. However, as the evening progresses, they decide to do a seance, and then evil presences are starting to take a hold of people. And more menacing figures appear, and also the stench of the swamp, and the stench of decay, and the smell is awful. And passages start opening up, and the whole building seems to start decaying in places. And it turns out that there used to be, like, I want to say in the 19th century, there used to be a penitentiary there that was owned by a person who tried to, or whose belief it was that in order for people to pay for their crimes, they should be put to work. So forced labor, which of course isn't a new thing, and it's also been going on even in our century, in different countries. And he basically decided that they should be put to doing work that is completely mind-numbing, very repetitive, like cyclical, like, you know, really lashing someone to a wheel and making them turn it, like a little bit in the opening scene of Conan. You just keep going, just keep going until your mind goes. And hundreds of people must have died in his care. He also used different apertures to basically, apparatuses, I should say, to torture them really badly. And more they come across these, and one by one our heroes are picked off and are either killed or found in those apparatuses. And there's also this kind of like, labor makes you free and so on and so forth. And I was really, this sentence even jarred with me for various reasons. It was something that was used by the Third Reich Nazis and was emblazoned across concentration camps. But I'm not sure if Grady Hendrix knows this, but in 2012 it came out, and IKEA also openly published it, that in the 1970s and 1980s, IKEA had used slave labor produced by or given by, well, not given, but forced labor of political prisoners in the GDR to have their furniture made. And I don't know if Grady actually knows about this, but to me that was just like another one, you're using forced labor to get stuff. The book is very terrifying in places. The atmosphere is great for a horror book. It's not easy reading. Some of the stuff is really hard to stomach. Some of the stuff is, like I said, at least for people in Germany, quite hard to swallow. This idea of, like putting people to forced labor, until work them to death and stuff, especially using sentences like labor makes you free. And it all ends in a very similar way, in my opinion, to my best friend's exorcism, because one of them definitely dies and the other ones vanish, but Amy and the store manager basically make it out alive. And then Amy basically goes into a torpor. She moves in with her mother, she stays in the trailer for months, she doesn't do anything. It gets to the point where her parents, or her stepfather and her mother, want her to move out, and it's like, you can't just let yourself go, you need to pick up your life again, blah 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 blah. But she's really traumatized, and I really like this about Grady Hendrix, because he really shows how, he shows that you can survive almost anything, you can be really resilient, but it does take its toll. But after a while, his protagonists are able to maybe not move on, but move forward, because neither of the two moves on, because she basically then decides that she needs to find a job because she needs to support herself, and so she goes back to the Orsk building, which is now a mom and baby shop kind of thing, and she gets hired. And on her first day, she meets the former store manager from the Orsk store that she basically had this adventure with. And she comes in with a large rucksack. And then he says, "Oh, it's you." And she's like, "Oh, it's you." And he's like, "Yeah." And he says, basically, he explains to her that he's back because he wants to go back in. He has now equipped himself better, more fully, and he's going to go in because nobody's going to stay there. He is going to help his former employees for whom he feels really responsible. And that's Amy's plan too. Hence the big backpack. Hence the much better equipment that she's going to take with her, because the two of them are going in. And I really like this about this book, because they were in dire straits. They really tried everything to save everybody. They failed. They decided they now needed to look after themselves to, get out of there. And nobody would blame them. But the courage of the two of them to say, independently of each other, because neither of them knew that the other one was going to be there as well, decided that they would go back in on their own to try and find their, not even friends. They even say it, they're not our friends, because nobody should be left down there. I find that so satisfying, this resilience, this nobody's going to be left behind. People will look out for each other. People will even look beyond their differences, and people, this gives me hope. I mean, this is a very hopeful ending to a book, just like the book ending of My Best Friend's Exorcism. The last page or 2 pages really made me cry. I'm not going to give away what happens, because I think you need to read it for yourself and you need to experience it for yourself. But again, after everything that has happened, after the harrowing experience, there is hope, and hope lies within the courage that people find within themselves when they are put to the greatest test. And there, it doesn't matter. This is not family. These are not even friends, but they know nobody should be left behind. We cannot leave people in the lurch. We can't let them down. We can help, or we must try, and possibly die trying. And I really like this about Grady Hendrix. I've already got another book of his in the next room. It's the Last Girls Support Group, or whatever it's called. And I'm really looking forward to this. But I really have to say that Grady Hendrix's books speak to me. And for me, Horrorstör, and I still don't know if this is supposed to be Horrorstör or Horror Story. It covers both concepts, I guess, is a must read if you like horror, if you're not afraid of body horror, if you're not afraid of really unsettling, gory scenes that are in there. But it's a really good book, and it does have a lot of action. So again, a haunted house. So this is my haunted house trilogy. The September house will be up next. Talk to you soon. Bye.